Welcome back to another episode of I Wish They Knew, a show where we share big ideas that deserve more attention in about the time it takes to enjoy a cup of coffee. I'm Joe Hirsch. Today's wish comes from Tamara Myles. Tamara is a speaker, author, and professor specializing in the science of human flourishing at work. And boy, wouldn't it be great if we had more of that? She helps leaders and organizations like Microsoft, KPMG, and MassMutual unlock the power of meaningful work, drive peak performance, innovation, and resilience. Also a good thing. She teaches at Boston College and at the University of Pennsylvania, and she's the co-author of a great book called Meaningful Work: How to Ignite Passion and Performance in Every Employee. We had her co-author Wes Adams on a few episodes ago. I think this is going to be a really powerful part two for those who didn't catch that episode. And if you didn't, we'll link it up in the show notes. Hey, Tamara, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited for our conversation.
I feel like I've now completed the circle.
All right. Full circle moment.
That's right. So tell us what you wish more people knew.
I wish more people knew that meaningful work is not just about intensity. It's also about frequency.
So how often leaders are making work meaningful for people and how often they experience that sense of meaning? That's what makes work more meaningful.
Yeah, we often think about meaningful work, and the narrative around meaningful work is often woven throughout big stories of moments of impact, like a doctor who saved a life, or a teacher who made a difference in a student's experience, and that impacted his life 30 years later, or something like that. And those moments, of course, are very powerful and very meaningful. But what's missing from the story is those everyday moments that matter, the moments when we feel seen, the moments when we feel valued, the moments when we feel like someone believes in us. And so those everyday moments are really the ones that have the most impact on our experience every day. And when we have those moments of building community, feeling like we're contributing to something that matters, and feeling like somebody's giving us meaningful challenges, work and our experience of work becomes very meaningful.
And leaders really do play an outsized role in driving those three factors: the community, the contribution, and the challenge. Can you give us a sense of why those three areas in particular are such powerful inputs to meaningful work?
Yeah, so as humans, we, have a natural drive to feeling like we matter and like what we do every day matters. We need to understand, are we valued as a person? Do I feel valued, but do I add value? And that's where those three C's come in, right? The community is, okay, I am valued. I matter here. People want to know me. They care about me as I have meaningful relationships at work. And if I didn't show up to work one day, somebody would notice and call and check in. So things like that really build community. And then contribution is, does what I do here matters? Do I add value? And so leaders have a big role in showing us and reinforcing the value that we add. And then finally, the challenges. Does my growth matters here? We're wired to learn and grow and develop. And so when a leader sees potential in us and says, this is going to be hard, but I know you can do it. How can I support you? And gives us those opportunities, it feels really meaningful.
And those are not grand gestures, right? Those are everyday inputs that just make work feel a little bit less like work, more like joy.
Exactly. It's the everyday moment of, hey, Joe, on Friday, you mentioned that this weekend you were going to go fishing. How was that? Did you catch anything? 30 seconds. And you're like, oh gosh, she remembered that I was going, these moments in 30 seconds, and they really add up. And the other one in contribution is, appreciating people, acknowledging their contributions and saying, hey, thank you so much for putting in the extra effort for that report. The customer personas you included was so creative. I really appreciate you bringing your strengths and doing the effort. Because of you, we closed that deal. Something like that. Again, 30 seconds.
Doesn't take much, but has a big impact. So leaders do play a big role in driving that and pushing the meaning-facing elements forward. But I imagine there's a place and a role for other people within the organization to help signal that to people who are looking for a more meaningful work experience. Can you talk about some of the ways that this could play out, perhaps maybe even in the hiring process, ways that companies can signal these meaning markers for those who really want that and think it's important?
Yeah, I mean, that's so important right now, especially Gen Z, right? The ones that are entering the workforce. But really, everyone is looking for more than a paycheck at work. They want to join an organization where they feel like they can have a meaningful experience there. They want to spend a third of their lives, that we spend at work in a way that matters, that feels meaningful. And so it's really important for organizations to signal those green flags of meaningful work. And what we found in our research is that those beginnings, the way we hire and onboard people, has a significant and lasting impact on our experience of meaningful work at that organization. And so if you're not focusing on meaningful work and sending those green flags in the hiring process, I highly encourage you to. And the best way to do that is to think about the 3 C's. So community, right? Let's start here. How do we build community here? So tell stories about that. So, just last week, we had a company-wide volunteering opportunity where we went to the soup kitchen and did da 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 da. And then you say, and one other really great thing that we do in our team is that every week, one person gets to share a story about whatever. And so like these little moments of highlighting how community happens in everyday moments in bigger ways is a great way to signal what it's really like to work here and how do we build relationships with each other. And the same for contribution. You can share your own stories about the time that felt meaningful when somebody acknowledged you. You can also share what the company does from a systems perspective. We have a internal teams network where we send gratitude to each other, and it's really great because people really love hearing from their colleagues and how they impacted them. But we also once a year do a big recognition program where colleagues nominate people and they get voted or whatever. So you can kind of show how recognition is done. Another way to highlight contribution in the interview process is to talk about the impact that their role specifically is going to have on the mission, the purpose of the organization, right? Because often organizations talk about their purpose and their mission, right? But what's missing is activating that purpose for each individual. So having a grand mission, a great purpose helps attract talent. But people really need to understand, how is it that what I'm going to do every day, those emails that I'm sending and those reports and the spreadsheets, how does that contribute to that purpose? So telling those stories also hugely impactful and important. And then finally, for challenge is how does growth and development happen in this role? What are the opportunities for mentorship, for learning? Is there a lot of internal hiring and promotion? If I start in this job and feel like I want to go laterally to a different part of the organization, how does it happen? If I don't want to lead people and want to be an individual contributor, is there still room for growth? So kind of answering all those questions without having the candidate ask them is a really good way to signal those green flags of meaning.
Let's go back to purpose for a moment, because you said something there that really struck me, that purpose is the antidote to burnout, which, is a meaning killer in the workplace. And one of the things you do well in the book is document that burnout is not so much a consequence of hard work. It's rather the result of doing work that hardly matters. So what can companies do to help people draw that line of purpose from what they do to why it matters, to help spark that meaning and prevent that burnout?
That's a great question. And I think that's the missing link, because people confuse meaning and purpose and they think, oh, well, if I have a purpose, it's going to be a great place to work. Like people are going to find meaning here. And we work with nonprofit organizations that have a mission that attracts people and mission driven workplaces that still doesn't feel as meaningful because people don't understand their impact to that purpose. And so we say contribution activates purpose. One way to do that is adopt a day maker mindset. And I'll tell you a quick story. So my hairdresser is Brienne, and she's awesome. I've been going to her for like 10 years and I love going the day that I get to go to her, it's like a great day. And
I feel
one
the
day,
same way about my hairdresser also.
right, exactly. But one day, a few years ago, when we were doing the research, when Wes and I were in grad school and had just started the research, she was asking me about what I was doing in the research. And I told her, oh, I'm studying meaningful work. And she stopped and she looked at me in the mirror and she was like, Tamara, I don't see myself as a hairdresser. I see myself as a day maker. And I was like, oh, well, tell me more. And she said that in the salon, David Wagner, who was the owner, told the story of a day that one of his customers came in. Regular customer came in for a haircut and color. And during the appointment, he connected with her. She laughed at his jokes. He hugged her goodbye. And a few days later, he got a letter from that customer. And in the letter, she said she was planning to take her own life that day. And the only reason she had come in was to have her hair styled for her funeral. But the connection that she experienced with David that day gave her just enough hope to check herself into the hospital. And she wanted to let him know. And he was shocked, of course, like taken aback. He had never thought of his job as life-changing. But that day, his like a haircut and a color saved a life.
Yeah.
And so it made him think about the impact that we can have in these small moments of connection. And so everyone he trains now gets trained in this day maker mindset. How are we not just doing the job that we're doing, but how are we becoming day makers? And so for leaders, how are you helping your people become day makers? And it can be done through coaching questions. Like what's better in the world because of what you did today? What would happen if you didn't do your job for a week? Who does your job impact? So you can ask questions, coaching, and help people discover for themselves, or you can tell those stories and highlight the impact that people have. Collect stories of impact from customers, from colleagues, and then share those. Start meetings with these stories. Send, if you're remote, send a video, share it out with people. Those are really, really important.
Yeah, it's one thing to have mission and mantras and mottos up on the wall, but it's another to actually get people to actively think and reflect about the nature and the impact of their work. And that's so much more meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then when we can understand, oh my goodness, because I spent a whole week working on that spreadsheet that felt so meaningless, because I did that, then this thing happened. And like now this customer was able to do this other thing. You know what I mean? Like connecting those dots can be so impactful.
One other way to create a much more meaning rich experience for people at work is to make sure that it's a place where people can feel a sense of openness, a sense of permission to be themselves. That doesn't seem to work very well when there's a culture of blame and defensiveness. What have you found in your research about ways that leaders specifically can create that kind of an open environment that fosters that sense of personal thriving?
Yeah. So a big key to that is building psychological safety, right? We hire people based on their skills and expertise. And then once they get there, they're not allowed to use those skills and expertise that they were specifically hired for, right? Because they don't feel safe sharing their ideas because they get shot down. People aren't curious and open. And so as a leader, it's really up to you to create the environments where people share freely. The best way to build psychological safety, it's inviting participation, like really actively. So you set the stage and then you invite participation after you kick it off. You actively ask people, what am I missing? What are my blind spots here? Like what have we not thought of? And then you say, hey, Joe, I noticed you were really quiet in the meeting. Do you have anything to add? And then the most important one is to respond productively. Because if we do the other two, but then Joe says, well, actually, Tamara, I thought that, the thing you said is like way off. And in my experience, that has never worked before. If I say, well, but in my experience, it does work. So thanks for the input, but we're going to do it my way anyways. Would you ever speak up again?
Yeah, that's like total sham participation.
Exactly. So, and it's hard. We're all humans. It's hard to not get defensive, right? It's hard to take feedback that we did something wrong or that the way we're thinking about it is wrong. And as leaders, we make or break the effort of building psych safety. So, a good script to follow is to start with "Thank you," you know, and then say either, so Joe, thanks so much for bringing that up. Wow, I didn't see things this way. And then you can say, this caught me really off guard. I need a little time to think about this. Let's circle back at the end of the day or next week or whatever. So it's fine if you're feeling defensive and you need time to process and think, you can say that. Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I'm sure it was hard for you to speak up like this. I need a little time to process. Why don't we touch base again later? Or you can say, depending on what it is, oh, wow, Joe, thanks so much for bringing that up. What do other people think? And if you want to continue the conversation, but like the thank you is really important. And in the book, we share a framework called PAIR for responding productively. And we have that on our website. You can go and look, and it's free resources, but it's really, really important. The way we respond really builds or destroys psych safety.
Yeah, it's that sense of curiosity, but also that sense of commitment that you're
Yeah.
prepared to take action on.
Exactly.
The book is Meaningful Work, and the author, and she made this a very meaningful conversation today, is Tamara Myles. Tamara, thanks for sharing your wish with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.